A very warm good morning to all of you. Dear students, once again I would like to welcome all of you to a new session of the history class. Today we are going to continue with the same chapter, chapter number 11, the Second World War, part 4. Do you remember what we were discussing in the previous classes? We were discussing what were the different reasons behind the emergence of the Second World War, the different causes. And we have seen three different causes in detail. First one, dissatisfaction with the Treaty of Versailles. Secondly, rise of fascism and Nazism. And third one, Japanese invasion of China. So these were the three different causes which we have discussed in the last classes. Today we are going to discuss the fourth reason behind the emergence of the Second World War, that is failure of League of Nations. You might be familiar with this name, League of Nations. League of Nations came to exist by the end of the First World War, as per the Treaty of Versailles. So, how it became, or how its failure took place, what were the different causes behind the failure of League of Nations? We are going to discuss about it in today's class. There were different reasons. First of all, it created after the First World War. League of Nations took birth by the end of the First World War, by the Treaty of Versailles. Last clause according to the Treaty of Versailles was about the implementation of the League of Nations. So League of Nations created, but USA was not a member of the League of Nations. You might be remembering who were the leaders behind the formation of League of Nations. You might be remembering it, right? First of all, the President of America, then the Prime Minister of Britain, and the Prime Minister of France. Or in other words, three countries together, or the victorious countries of the First World War, they have created League of Nations, because it was the last clause according to the Treaty of Versailles. So we can say that America, Britain and France together introduced the ideology of League of Nations. But you know, the fact is that America was not a member of the League of Nations. So it is shown the weakness of League of Nations. So USA was not a member of the League of Nations. No members were interested in collective security. Since League of Nations was an organization of all the nations, or in other words, all the nations were involved in the formation of League of Nations. So the members were not interested in collective security, which means suppose if League of Nations were having 100 members, it is the responsibility of all the 100 members not to get involved in any wars. If there is any kind of problem, they have to remain neutral. They should not fight with any other country. They have to provide all the facilities asked by the League of Nations. So certain terms and conditions were there. So none of the members were interested in collective security, because the security of the nations were vested with all the different nations collectively. So they were not interested in. Again, League of Nations solved problems of small nations. When there was issues between powerful nations, League of Nations were not able to make necessary action, or they were not able to take effective actions against the powerful countries. So it is shown their weakness. So it was one another reason behind the failure of League of Nations. So the lack of power of League of Nations were exposed through certain number of actions which took place in the world. And the first event took place in 1920. Poland, with the support of France, attacked and seized some of the parts of Lithuania. But you know, you have to remember the point, France was one of the powerful countries in the world. At the same time, they were supporting League of Nations, or the two different countries who were the supporting factors behind the League of Nations were France and England. So when France supported Poland, they have attacked on Lithuania and they have seized some of the parts. So it is shown that, or it proved that League of Nations is not going to take necessary actions against the powerful countries. League of Nations were not able to survive without the support of France and Britain. Since France supported Poland, in the case of Lithuania, they were not able to do anything. So it was one incident. And again by 1923, there were a number of problems between Italy and Greece. Italy started to attack and conquer some parts of the Greek, and they have approached the Greek rulers, they have approached the League of Nations, and League of Nations have given instruction to Italy, but Italy was not ready to listen to the League of Nations. They were having a concept that in the case of Lithuania, League of Nations was not able to take any action since France was involved in that case. Then why we have to follow the rules and regulations or the instructions of the League of Nations? So Italy was not ready to listen to League of Nations. So as a result, France and Britain together made a settlement, and in that settlement, League of Nations lost its significance, because France and Britain together, or only France and Britain were able to make such a strong decision on Italy in order to support Greece. So they have settled the problem by sudden mediation, or they have settled the case by using their own power. So in that case, League of Nations lost its significance. They lost their relevance. So it was another reason behind the emergence of the Second World War, or in other words, it led to the failure of League of Nations. So the different nations, they came to know that League of Nations is inactive, or they can't do anything. Of course, when France and Britain alone, they were able to make such a strong decision, they were able to make, or they were able to solve such a big problem. What does it show? The weakness of League of Nations. So slowly League of Nations lost its significance. All the different countries slowly started to ignore League of Nations. Even though League of Nations was giving instructions, none of the countries were ready to follow it, and they have started to ignore League of Nations. And publicly it has happened by 1931. Japan insulted League of Nations and seized Manchuria. Or in other words, when Japan declared war on Manchuria, League of Nations have given warning and instruction to Japan, but Japan attacked and seized Manchuria. It was something like insulting League of Nations. It was not the end. In 1936, Italy conquered Ethiopia. Italy has already got warning from League of Nations, but Italy was not ready to obey it. And again by 1936, they have conquered Ethiopia. So all these different incidents proved or shown the weak part of League of Nations. Slowly all the different members of the League of Nations, they came to know that League of Nations is a failure, because they were not able to take adequate actions against powerful nations. Or if a country is not ready to follow the instruction of the League of Nations, they were not able to enforce certain rules and regulations on them, since it was an organization of the whole world, or the whole countries of the world. So finally League of Nations came to a failure, and it resulted in the Second World War. Now we are going to see the other important factors why it was a failure, why League of Nations was a failure. First of all, there were no powerful machinery to act. Since they were acting as the puppet of France and Britain, they were not able to take any powerful actions because they were not having any machinery to do it. Secondly, no powerful economic sanctions against an aggressor. In the first example which we have seen, when Poland made the first aggression with the support of France, League of Nations was not able to take any actions because League of Nations was always being supported, especially economically supported by France. So no powerful economic sanctions against an aggressor. Again, states were not interested to implement economic sanctions. States in the sense the members of League of Nations. Those countries were not interested to sanction any economic facilities for League of Nations. So without the support of the nations or the members, League of Nations was not able to survive. So states were not interested to implement economic sanctions. So finally, League of Nations was not able to maintain international peace because even though they have given warnings, instructions and necessary commandments to different nations, those nations were not ready to follow it. As a result, the number of small wars started to break out in different parts of the world. And countries like Italy, Germany and all, they have taken advantages from that and they have left League of Nations. When they understood that League of Nations will become a barricade for them, they left League of Nations and started to move in their own way. So number of wars started to take place in different parts of the world. It disturbed the peaceful atmosphere of the world. So finally, League of Nations was not able to maintain international peace. As a result, European countries lost its faith in League of Nations. And slowly it led to the emergence of the Second World War. So dear students, I hope you have got a very clear idea about the points which we have discussed today. And in the next class, we will be going to discuss the next point. Still then, I would like to sign off. Thank you.